Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, all you porcupines, you. Happy New Year. This is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, coming to you for episode 49 of the Porcupine Report. Thank you so much for being here with us every single Wednesday. Well, we did miss one, but generally every single Wednesday, we're bringing you a new episode of the Porcupine Report, which you can find on the Free State Project pages on X, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you are consuming this content. I hope that you will share and like and subscribe and do all the things. Leave a review if that makes sense for wherever you're consuming it. It really does help spread the reach of the show and build our audience. And I always appreciate the great audience feedback I seem to get every single week. There are so many of you out there watching, both in New Hampshire and around the country. It's great to know that we're reaching so many good people who love freedom and liberty, because that's what we're all about in New Hampshire, achieving liberty in our lifetimes. And in that regard, I am actually really excited to announce, before we get to our guest today, an event we have coming up. This is going to be on February 2nd. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, February 2nd, why isn't that Groundhog Day? Yes, you're technically right, but in New Hampshire on February 2nd, we are going to be celebrating Porcupine Day. So move over, groundhogs. We don't care. Yeah, maybe we care a little bit whether or not there's going to be a long winter or not, but what we really care about is the prospects for freedom and liberty, and that's what the porcupines will tell us, or we'll tell ourselves. We're the porcupines, and we are celebrating Porcupine Day, Sunday, February 2nd. This is the annual anniversary that we do for the last 9 years. This will be the 9th year of Porcupine Day, celebrating the anniversary of when we triggered the move with the Free State Project, when we reached 20,000 pledges for people to move to New Hampshire and build the Liberty homeland here. So 9 years in, we are still welcoming so many people, and we are celebrating February 2nd, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., Porcupine Day. This is going to be held in Manchester, New Hampshire at the Rugged Axe. We're going to be doing axe throwing. It's going to be a fun time. This is a good activity for families, but only 12 and older. So throw axes. We're encouraging people to, in the spirit of the axe throwing, to wear your best flannel, like I always do. My whole closet is filled with LL Bean flannels, so I'm raring and ready to go. You can get tickets for Porcupine Day celebration at fsp.org/Porcupine Day. And a few things to know for you, especially for the audience of this show. If you use the discount code Pork Report, that's pork with a C, not with a K, Pork Report, all one word, you can get 5% off your tickets for Porcupine Day. So I hope that if you are in the area, if you are in New Hampshire, you will come and join us for a very fun time. And as an added bonus, if you are a patron of the Free State Project, not only do you get a slightly better discount on the tickets, though if you are a higher level porcupine, like a porcupine patron, silver level or above, you get a complimentary ticket to Porcupine Day. We hope that you will join us. And if you come wearing your porcupine patron lapel pin, we'll give you a complimentary drink ticket when you arrive as well. So wear your porcupine patron pin, get your Porcupine Pork Day ticket at fsp.org/Porcupine Day. And I would love to see you there. And that's my message for the start of the show. Let's get into what we're really here to talk about today, which is I'm So excited as the new legislature comes in New Hampshire. We've got a new year, a new legislature in New Hampshire, and there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the prospects for liberty policies. We've got a strong legislature, 98 elected liberty legislators, according to the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, 5 in the Senate, 93 in the House. Many free staters have even been elected to leadership in the House of Representatives. We're going to be talking with one of those newly elected leaders in the House. Actually, he was our guest on the very first episode of the Porcupine Report. We've had 47 episodes between now and then, and we're welcoming him back for the first time. His name is Representative Tom Mannion. He is the newly elected Assistant or New Hampshire House Majority Assistant Whip. I think I got the title right. Let's welcome him to the show, Tom Mannion. Hey, we got you muted, Tom. I can't hear you. There we go.
There we're good now. All right, cool.
You look so excited and enthusiastic. I'm sorry I couldn't hear what you said.
It's all good. Thanks for having me back. This is great. I'm glad to be back.
By the way, that is a wonderful Porcupine patron pin that you're wearing. Looks great on you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for providing it.
Well, thanks for being a patron. I hope it makes an appearance once or twice at the State House.
Absolutely.
So, Tom, this is if I remember right, this is your second term in the House of Representatives.
Yep, that's correct.
The first time we had you on, you were coming at the end of your first term in the fight for Defend the Guard legislation, which you've been a champion of, which is a very important legislation to my mind, something I fought for in Maine, and New Hampshire has gotten even further on it, having passed the House of Representatives last year. But there's plenty of fight ahead. So, but how, first of all, before we get into all the legislation that's coming up and things that people should be following, you got elected to leadership. What were you thinking? Are you going to become one of the bad guys now?
Well, I mean, we'll see how long I retain the title, right? Eventually, I'm going to do something that's not going to make people happy, I would imagine. But my roles are pretty simple. I'm an assistant to the Majority Whip's office, and our job is to basically figure out what the temperature of the room is for everybody in the caucus. Whenever we send out our questionnaires, we ask people, how you feel on this? How do you feel on that? And we just have to check up with people and make sure that we're not like a divided caucus on anything, and get the people that might be on the edge, like try to figure out what their qualms are with whatever bills may be out.
All right, I assume, and they call this the whip position because I've always thought it because like you're metaphorically whipping the members of the caucus to vote a particular way. Is leadership going to get upset when you're only whipping them for liberty bills?
Well, the good news is a good chunk of our leadership is liberty people. So I think as long as we're heading in the direction where it's like we're maximizing individual liberty, reducing taxes, and shrinking the state, I think that's going to make a lot of people happy in leadership, honestly.
Awesome. So you're in a good position where you're expected to whip the maybe the more liberal members to be, and by liberal I mean not in the classical sense. The more liberal members to vote for liberty. So that's the right kind of whipping to do.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I guess I imagine, with kind of the table is set, right? There's Republican control of the House, the Senate, the governorship. Of course, not all Republicans are liberty Republicans. So I'm sure there will be some internal fighting over issues, particularly between the House and the Senate and the governors. In New Hampshire, there's no governor's mansion, right?
No, he just
all right.
Yeah, he has a corner office, just like that's actually fancy for us because none of the reps have offices.
Oh, all right. Things I'm still learning. Well, in Maine, you don't get an office unless you're a committee chairman. So, or in leadership, which so I didn't have an. Well, I guess I was a committee chair for 4 years. I did have an office. I had to share it with a Democrat, though. It was anyway. That's neither here nor there. So what should the people back home who want to see kind of liberty advance and tyranny stalled out in New Hampshire, what should they be looking for over the course of the next year? What's coming up?
There's like a whole mess. I have like an entire sheet here of things, and I kind of want to just hit like some of the greatest hits, like some of the highest profile, and like they're, leadership's right on board with this. This is a high caucus priority. Things like these, like I'm gonna come right out of the gate with education, right? So we want universal school choice. We have what used to be considered like the gold standard. Our EFA is like an education savings account system. It's similar to like a health savings account. You get the money from the state for your child. The money follows the child wherever you want to take him. But we do have an income cap, and it kind of makes it so that a good chunk of the state is not eligible for this program. So they're stuck in the government school system. We want to make that universal, of course. That's Valerie McDonald, who's out of Salem, is the prime sponsor on that. She was the youngest legislator last term.
All right.
She was like 18 years old.
All right. I've been the youngest legislator at one point, and I find that usually someone comes around and usurps that title from you. Yep. So she's. Let me ask you. So, universal school choice, education freedom accounts, which, full disclosure, I'm a big supporter of. I think it's awesome, but I know I do always get some pushback from some in the education freedom community who are always concerned that where taxpayer dollars flow, government strings will come attached. What do you say to someone who has that concern around expanding education freedom accounts?
That's what the Dems always try to do. Between the last 2 years the last term of over the 2 years, there was some 100-something bills just for education, and a good chunk of them were just trying to undermine the system, either put like testing requirements or all kinds of like hurdles in the way that make it so it becomes impractical to want to use, or it ends up defunding the program through the back door. And we just have to be vigilant on that. In this case, it's all this does is it raises the income cap. It removes the income cap so that everybody can be eligible for the program. It doesn't add more strings or anything like that. The idea is to just not let the Dems get in there and mess it up.
Yeah. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance.
Exactly.
What is the income cap right now, and how much money can families qualify for?
So I think it's around like 450% of the federal income or federal poverty level, which is I forget what the actual number works out to be, but it's like a dual income house is like 80-something thousand or something along those lines. The current money is it's not it's not a lot, but it goes a long way. It's about like $4,500 to $5,000 in there, like depending on I think if you have a special education student, I think there's more involved in it. Like there's a lot of granular details, but it's right around that range per child. And you're basically, there's a whole list of things that qualify that for this program, that in like the state, this is all available on like the Department of Education at the state level, that you can see what qualifies for the spending. You can't just like spend it willy-nilly wherever you want. It has to be like a vetted thing, but the vetted list is pretty long. So if you have like a homeschooling system, you can buy things on Amazon with it, as long as they are conducive to education, things along that. There's all kinds of like new, like innovative type, schools that are coming up through the state because of the education freedom system that you can send your child to. I know you've had guests on in your show that that run these programs. Like they're fantastic programs.
Yeah, I know the folks at the Latitude Learning. Yes. They make use of that program, and they've got an amazing resources available there for homeschooling families. And I would imagine if there's any one thing that like New Hampshire Republicans have a clear mandate on, I would imagine, considering it seemed to me like the New Hampshire Democrats like ran specifically against this program.
Yeah.
This is what they were campaigning on, is accusing Republicans of attacking government schools and I guess certainly it's an attack on their monopoly status. And
absolutely.
And the voters rejected them on that.
Yes.
It was clearly one of the clearest. I mean, they made it one of the biggest election issues, and they lost on it. So
yes, they did.
Anything that New Hampshire Republicans have a mandate on, it seems to me that education freedom is it.
Yep. To segue into something else, like a big thing in New Hampshire, the biggest problem, like the number one issue facing people in the state, especially when I was door knocking all summer for like the Senate primary that I was helping with, was housing. And there are like a massive amount of bills that are coming through. We even broke off a special, like municipal and county used to be the committee that handled all housing things, but we have now made a dedicated committee that used to be it was a temporary committee last year, and they brought it over, made it a permanent committee whose entire function is to investigate and find solutions to the housing crisis currently in New Hampshire. And a good chunk of that is just like overzealous zoning. Like we are a Dillon rule state, so we allow, like the state can impose rules upon the towns. And we gave them like a really long leash a while ago, like years and years back, to, you know, do what they will with the zoning. And there's an amazing zoning atlas that came out of oh man, it was Jason Sorens and his group was working with it with St. Anselm's, and it's an amazing zoning atlas, and you can break that thing down and see like how difficult it is to build even like a one family home on less than an acre size lot if you wanted to build like a ranch or something on like a small footprint. And it's just very difficult to do that in New Hampshire. So we have a ton of stuff coming down the pike. Joe Alexander is like one of the representatives. He's up from Goffstown. There's like redefining ADUs, and then they're going to establish a commission that's going to study the New Hampshire zoning. And they need to find solutions to this, because that is one of the part of the New Hampshire Republican mandate was like, we will find solutions to this problem. Because when we were door knocking, that was like, there was so many retirees and stuff. They're like, we can't downsize. If we want to downsize, we have to leave state. Or there's young parents whose kids are coming of age and they can't live in the state. They have to leave the state. There's nowhere for them to move. There's nowhere for like a new family in their 20s to buy a home, like a single family home on like a small acre lot. They just don't exist.
Yeah, it's always, and I saw this in Maine. Probably to a lesser degree. I mean, I don't know to what degree the demand to move into Maine versus the demand to move in New Hampshire are I've never seen them compared, but I know it was similar issues in trying to kind of do zoning reform. You always got tremendous pushback from the municipalities who want total local control over this, which I understand to a degree. Yeah. How do you kind of see the legislature, I suppose, balancing those oftentimes very, very loud desires for local control over zoning, and I guess how far is the legislature kind of willing to do that, to give people more control, individual control over how they use their property?
So a good chunk of these are dealing with like, especially like cities, like the areas that already have like municipal water and stuff like that, because you do run into like the environmental argument where it's like, you can't have such a small, if you're running on septic and wells, you can only make a lot so small. And then you're like the aquifers being taxed and then potential runoff from the septic system. There's that entire argument. But a good chunk of this is just like, some of these cities just like make mandatory parking spot like allotments for any unit. Like you try to make like a 4-family house and it's like, well, every single unit has to have 2 dedicated parking spots. And so that just like takes up all kinds of space like on the property. That just makes it impossible to develop. So like that's one of another bill that's in front of the housing committee that's coming down the pipeline. Because I mean, our objectives are the same, right? Like we want to bring free staters here, right? To move. If there's nowhere for them to move, how do we solve this? And there is a balancing act between, we do not want to stomp on the local municipalities, especially if there are like actual like whether or not you have runoff or something into like wetlands or something like that. There are legitimate complaints that they have, the towns. We can't just come and have like a one size fits all. But there are little areas where it's obvious that like some of these towns and cities are just like gaming the system. Man, there's some areas in the state that I think had like a minimum lot size of like 5 acres or something. Like what the hell? Like that was one of the things I saw in the zoning atlas. Like, what do you mean minimum lot size of 5 acres?
You know, I often wonder to what degree a lot of the resistance to allow new housing construction is a factor of, you know, maybe I'm going to go a little bit down the rabbit hole of how much I hate the Federal Reserve, but like in a society with kind of a depreciating currency, the dollar is losing value day after day, and so like for the middle class, your home becomes your savings account, right? Yep. And so we put our value into home equity, and we want to see that home equity rise year after year, which means, of course, housing is getting less and less affordable and more expensive year after year, which if you're kind of bought in and you have your value, you know, your wealth tied to the value of your home, you kind of have an incentive to support policies that artificially create scarcity in housing and restrict the supply of housing. And so, you know, not to blame so much the people who are trying to block development. For that reason, they're responding to incentives, I suppose.
Understandable. I get it, but it's like at the same time, those same people will be complaining about not being able to downsize.
Yeah.
They did. It's kind of, they can't have both. Like you want your children to be able to afford a home like in your town and like not move far away. You can't do that by strangling development.
Yeah. If you can't build where the future generation is going to live.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. Well, I'll be certainly following along there be curious to see, obviously, obviously the ability to build more housing in New Hampshire is very important to the mission of the Free State Project.
Yep.
Because housing affordability is one of the big obstacles for so many people.
Yep.
What else or should we be watching for in this new year?
A big one that's dear to my heart is I absolutely despise car inspections. That's something that's sponsored by Granger. He's the current political director of NHLA. He's the prime sponsor on that bad boy. We really hope to get that thing through. That might be one of those things that we have to stuff in the budget because I don't think it's going to get through the Senate with all like the lobbyist interests with like dealerships and repair shops. That from what I understand, this bill has passed the House in the past and always dies in the Senate. Almost like, I think it's like a unanimous kill in the Senate. So this is something we probably got to pass soon. There's an individual that contacted me on this, like on this topic. Like I know that most people watching this already agree that we shouldn't have it, but there's a little couple holdouts where it's like, oh, but we live in the Northeast where there's like snow and salt and like rust is a bigger problem and all that. This guy contacted me. He worked with the state trooper's office and he was part of like crash recreation for whatever it may be. And he says in the 20 something years he was doing that, and then he moved on to do it in the private sector for like another 15 years. He says in all that time, in the thousands of crashes that he's seen in this state, only 4 could be attributed to actual mechanical failure, and all 4 had passing inspection stickers. So like that's the kind of statistic that I hear, and I'm just like, holy crap, you got to be kidding me. And then like the dark part of that article is like he was talking, like he went on and on about like how these shops just take like the elderly through the ringer on purpose, and then they brag about it. They're like, oh well, we failed her for this thing, and they said the only way to fix it is to buy a new car, so we sold her a new Buick. And it's like, what the hell? Like,
wow.
Like they get exposed through the state because this guy was part of like the undercover like sting operations to like expose these. But it's just like, okay, so those are the ones that you caught. Like, where else is this happening? The whole thing's just like a money making racket, and it's like a government endorsed monopoly, not monopoly, but it's like a government endorsed extortion, right?
Yeah. Well, and you would think, this is one of those policies where, right, we do have 50 laboratories of innovation, and we can see that not every state has this. And I've never seen anyone be able to demonstrate kind of, compare a state with it and compare a state without these inspection requirements and you see any tangible benefit on the roads. So seems like the burden of proof should be on those who want to extort the people. These inspection stickers.
Yeah. Prove that it works. Like,
awesome. So that'll be something to watch. And I do see complaints from people online when we ask about like, what policies would you like to see change? This is one that comes up a lot is the inspection. So a nice little tyranny to try to get rid of. What else should people be watching for?
Yep. So out of labor, we have the right to work bill. This thing has famously been a huge problem to get through in this state. We think that the stars have aligned this time. Daniel Popovici Miller he's a guy out of Wyndham. He's the prime sponsor on this thing. He came out of like Soviet era. I think it was, I always forget the damn country. I want to say Romania. I'm sorry, Daniel, if I got the country wrong. It was an Eastern Bloc country, escaped communism, came to the United States, is like a hardcore capitalist, free speech absolutist, et cetera, et cetera. And he doesn't believe that he should be mandated to join a labor union. My brother's actually a co-sponsor on that. He's a current actual union member. He's an electrician union. He's seen the upsides and downsides, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't believe that mandatory membership should be a thing. He was, used to be in a teachers union in Massachusetts, and he said that was like the worst experience of his life. So that's why he's not a teacher anymore, and he's an electrician.
This will be such a great one to watch. I think the union bosses and their propagandists always try to frame right to work as an anti-union bill or anti-union workers bill. Frankly, I've met a lot of union workers who support right to work.
Yep.
And it's always seemed to me that really, it more than anything else, it creates accountability between union members and union bosses, because right now, like the accountability that exists between like a union member and a union boss in a non-right to work state is the same thing that exists between like the accountability between you and the governor. It's like theoretically you can vote them out, but unless you're able to get 50% plus one to agree with you, you really can't do anything about it. So if they're taking your union dues and they're shoveling them off to PACs and political campaigns for people who despise you and want to ruin your livelihood and want to steal your liberties and your freedoms, then there's nothing you can do about it. You're forced to pay in one way or the other. But if you can just say, you know what, I don't like how you're using my money and I don't want you representing me anymore, and I'm not going to pay union dues anymore, and I'm going to keep my job. Well, then they have to care a lot more about what the union members actually on an individual basis think and care about, and maybe they shouldn't be as political on things that don't directly have to deal with kind of the workers there. But and of course, boy, I don't mean to go on a tirade, but
no, that's fine. I like talking about it. I'm not an expert on the subject matter. Like I've been a big supporter. Like there's another component of that's kind of insidious with it's that free rider fee where the non-union members at a union shop or something, like if you're working side by side with union members, you're still obligated to pay into what you're describing, where they just funnel the money into like political PACs to secure their own monopolies on labor wherever they may be.
Right. They say you don't have to be a member, but you still have to pay these fees, which is the equivalent of union dues. And you know, and I always hear these arguments. Oh, you know, but someone's going to be a free rider. It's like, well, the unions themselves create the laws to require them to be the monopoly bargaining agent, right? So it's a lot of these people. Yeah, sure, maybe they shouldn't be able to benefit from whatever the union contract is, but like it's the unions that don't give them that choice. And I always think back to like, you know, the early 20th century, you know, and the union movement. Samuel Gompers, who was like one of the founders of, was it the Teamsters, one of the big labor unions, like he was absolutely opposed to forced unionism. He thought it was against the entire spirit of the labor movement. And so to see what it's come to, you know, over a century later, it's a corruption of what it began as. And so if New Hampshire passed right to work, that would make New Hampshire the first right to work state in New England.
Yes, it would be. And we predict that it would bring a lot of jobs here, because historically in the nation, that's what has happened. States that have passed right to work have had like an increase in labor, and wages honestly go up, like because the competition is increased. So it's like it ends up that it's a net benefit for all workers.
Yeah, I know a lot of businesses that have a lot of capital to invest, that when they're looking where to locate, they immediately write off any state without a right to work law. So right now, New Hampshire's not even considered, despite being ranked the most economically free state in North America. This one thing will get so many potential businesses to write off the state. So if this can get across the finish line, that would be excellent. And I hope that it will spur other states in New England to be competitive and have to follow New Hampshire's lead. So that'll be great to watch.
There's a couple like Overton window bills that I wouldn't mind talking about. I don't know if they're going to pass or anything, but a lot of these are in crim justice, and they come. There's a guy, Mike Belcher. He's real good. He's a conservative type, not really. He's pretty good on liberty. He's got a pretty good liberty score at NHLA and all that. He leans more conservative, but like these are like solid. Like they're about states' rights type bills. One is HB 102, and this one's about like this is kind of like kind of empowering sheriffs, because like sheriffs in the Northeast don't really have the same power that they do in other like southern states along those lines. But this one is a sheriff oversight of federal enforcement action. So it's like anywhere that the feds, like whether it be ATF, FBI, whoever, is going to be conducting an operation in the state, that the sheriffs are now going to be obligated to monitor. That's an idea. It starts powering up, like they can't do anything necessarily. I think he filed one like before with like it allowed them to, it was going to allow them to like deputize people, and like if the feds were enforcing a constitutionally protected act, that they can interfere. But that this is much more scoped down. This is more like observance.
Okay, but if they were, but I'm trying to understand. So the deputizing thing, maybe that's not coming forward, but in this case, like if the ATF showed up and said, we're confiscating everyone's firearms in this county because we hate the Second Amendment and your right to bear arms, the sheriff could say, you can't enforce that here. I won't allow you to, and I'm deputizing all the people of the county to
That's not this bill. That was the
that's
one.
not this bill, but that would be a great bill.
That's a funny bill. Like we call these ones Overton window because it's like brings awareness and like maybe like it becomes like gets in it. Like then weird stuff happens. So complete tangent here, but like last year I filed like a ridiculous bill about like raccoon, like it was legalizing squirrels, raccoons, like a bunch of list animals, and kangaroos were on there. I got like laughed at for the bill. And then this stuff happens with like Peanut and Fred out of New York, where like those people's pets were executed. And now that like every conservative is like, we need to protect the squirrels and raccoons. And so like James Spillane is filing a bill to do just that. And it's like, I mean, I tried to do that last year and you guys all laughed at me. Like, so sometimes there's like with the sheriff oversight thing, like it could be that something occurs and then the people cry for like, this is what we need. Like, Belcher was ahead of the curve. Like
they laughed at Ron Paul too, Tom. He was just ahead of his time.
Exactly. There's another one. Belcher's also filing. There's an exemption of firearms and accessories in New Hampshire from the National Firearms Act. I think Gearhart filed that one before. This has been challenged at the Supreme Court, but it's like every time we tweak it to be like, oh, well, we're going to try this because this is all about like challenging the Interstate Commerce Clause. Yeah. It's just like if it's stamped made in New Hampshire and we say it can't leave New Hampshire, how is this interstate commerce? And like, I think more and more states should be doing this, trying to challenge the interpretation of the Commerce Clause. Yeah. Because that was made back in like, was it like Wilburn, something way back in like the 20s.
Oh, and it was over someone like growing wheat on their own property for their own consumption. And they said, well, because you're growing this for yourself and consuming it yourself, you are not buying wheat.
Which affects interstate commerce,
right? So otherwise you would have been buying wheat from out of state, and so therefore this is still interstate commerce.
Yep,
crazy. I think that's kind of goes to show the danger of giving any branch of the federal government the total authority to interpret the federal government's power. There will always be a bias towards expanding that power. So that's exciting. If that happened, would that have any effect on the Gabby Gifford score? I know that
I hope so.
New Hampshire just very disappointingly, it was previously ranked an F by Giffords, the anti-gun group.
Yep.
And I think that our Second Amendment protections in New Hampshire has even improved since then. But it came back this year and gave New Hampshire a D-, and everyone's trying to figure out how do we get back to an F.
Well, we know that because it like skews their entire standard. Because we have such low crime. It's like us and Maine have like the lowest crime in like the entire country, and they like gun crime and everything that like it doesn't make sense within their narrative. So they can't give us like an F and then be like, well, but they have no crime. How are you giving them an F? So that's why they did that, I think.
Yeah. I imagine there was some politics that went into that.
Oh, for sure. So I got a couple more here about the federal government. So there's one, Travis Corcoran is like an amazing follow on Twitter. He likes to poke the bear. He loves to talk. Like you'll see his threads. They'll be like 40 things long. He filed one that specifically it's in response to what happened to Jeremy Kaufman. Like it got the Fed showed up at his house and he filmed them and it went viral on Twitter. And the problem here is like they showed up and like refused to show identification. Like he asked them, he's like, who are you? It's like, oh, we're with the FBI. He's like, well, can you like, what's your name? And one guy refused to give his name. It's like, how do you even know these people are actual federal agents and not just like some guys, in a polo shirt, right? Like who the hell are you?
It could be the mafia.
Exactly.
But I repeat myself. I mean, we already know it's the federal government.
Exactly. So this would make it so it's some kind of like felony along those lines. Like if somebody refuses to identify themselves, even if they are a federal agent, like, I don't know who the hell you are. You're claiming to be a federal agent. Prove it. Oh, you're not going to prove it. Well, that's a crime. Something along those lines. This is borderline like a potentially like First Amendment violation because you should be able to say whatever the hell you want. But I guess if you're showing up at somebody's house in an intimidating manner and like threatening them or in a threatening manner, like we just want to talk. And they're not refused, right? So now it's in your head, right?
Yeah. I think that there's definitely like there's definitely a nuanced line to figure out in there. Like, is it at the point where they're trying to like if they want to detain you and they haven't identified them? There should be some line that's crossed that at that point, like if you're not identifying yourself, there's a problem.
A lot of these are like, as I said, Overton window. Like we're just having the discussion about
shifting the narrative.
Yes. So like that's a good one. let's see. Oh, there's a couple about like drug legalization, right? So like New Hampshire famously does not have legal cannabis. This is like another thing that we get, like the car inspection thing. It's just a thing we just get poked at by people who are like, well, I'm not moving to New Hampshire until you like legalize cannabis.
You know, people can just do like I do and live in Dover, and the Maine border is right there.
Exactly. Or just, I live on the Mass border. So like everybody I know drives 5 minutes down the road to Tingsboro and just gets it there.
But we certainly do want legal cannabis in New Hampshire. I know that the conflict, as I understand it from conversations last year, and full disclosure to folks watching, I wrote a lot of the medical cannabis laws in Maine, so I'm very familiar with the nuances of cannabis policy. The conflict has been, as I recall, the House wanting to do a more market-based model where small businesses can be in the industry and people can home grow for themselves, versus the Senate and the previous governor, Sununu, wanted a more top-down government command and control model, kind of like with the way liquor sales are currently operated in New Hampshire.
It would have been literally under the Liquor Commission. They would have just like been in charge of cannabis as well, and it would have been a government monopoly. And like, so on this subject, the sponsor of, like, we have a cannabis bill that's coming down from Kevin Verville, who is famously in the State House. He's the guy that's like very pro, like you can do what you want with it, like drug usage, like to your own body, like psychedelics and everything. He's talked about the therapeutic value of things like LSD and such, for especially like PTSD treatment. But he's got another bill in that just blanket legalizes cannabis as if it was like cigarettes for anybody over 21.
All right.
Overton window stretching, not going to pass. I mean, it'll always pass the House. Cannabis will always pass the House. It's Senate is the problem. We'll get that thing. It'll pass. It'll go there. He also has one for psilocybin for over 21. So the two separate bills. I would have happily co-sponsored both of these. I don't know if he did a very good job of hunting for co-sponsors, but
now, do you know in New Hampshire currently, so it's decriminalized, but like you could theoretically get a fine. Is that right?
Yeah. It's a limit. So what the hell? It's like decriminalized under a certain bit, like 3/4 of an ounce. I forget what the limit is, but
okay.
But it's, my understanding, it's not something that's like super harped on or even like enforced. So it's kind of like de facto, who cares type thing, unless you're like traveling with pounds of it. But I think even in states with legal cannabis, I think having pounds and pounds might raise red flags. So
certainly there are, I know in Maine, at least there are, it's legal for adult use, legal for medical, but there are still, like, if you get caught transporting, large quantities and you aren't, I guess, a licensed person who's that you like
in the dealer business, and your job is to move it from that's probably the same thing here. I've never heard of anybody who's been like screwed over by our cannabis laws. It's kind of one of those things where like we get poked for, but it's like we're surrounded by places where it's legal, you can get it, and no one's really going to care, unless like the thing that the Senate always brings up is the smoking in public thing. Like they have a big problem with people just like doing it like on the sidewalk. And they always say like, oh, in front of the State House when children are walking by. That's something they always bring up.
It's like, okay, enforce that, right?
Yeah, just do that. That's fine. They're obviously like flaunting it, like whatever. Sure. I mean, I don't think they should be, whatever. It's fine.
I don't necessarily think someone should be like thrown in a cage forever for something like that, but we don't throw people in a cage forever for public drinking, right? There's some minor consequences, right? But get what you can get.
Yep. We have a couple. The federal government's talking about the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, where they're just talking about axing bureaus. There's a couple bills coming on the pipe about that.
All right.
One is from Representative Berry, removing the office of the consumer advocate, which is like I don't know where it came from. I think it's some lefty bureau underneath the energy department that is supposed to like advocate on the behalf of the consumers. Like, well, that's what email's for. That's et cetera. Like, so that's like one. There's also Belcher's dissolving. Let's see. These are very specific names. They're all like diversity equity things that are in the state government. So it's a HHS Office of Health Equity, the Department of Environmental Services, Civil Rights and Environmental Justice Department, and Governor's Council on Diversity and Inclusion. And I'm almost certain every single one of these has like a 6-figure bare minimum like budget component to their existence. So just stripping those things out is going to save us tax money.
I'd be very curious. I don't know what it is in New Hampshire, but I remember dealing with in Maine, the governor of Maine had created an advisor on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I was surprised to see, like, in the budget, it was like one of the highest paid positions that they were asking for.
Yep.
Right.
Schools are doing this too. Like the schools will have DEI directors. Like,
yeah,
it's ridiculous.
It was like almost like I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, I don't think it was quite a 6-figure position, but it was like very much almost.
Yeah. And it adds up, like every little bit. Like we're talking, like we want to cut the budget. Oh, that's the biggest component about all of this, right? So like when it all comes down and said and done, like what we need to focus on in the year one at the state legislature is to cut back on spending this damn year. We have to pass a budget, and we want to cut a good chunk from that. And that's like one of the big negotiation things that has to happen between the House, the Senate, and the governors. We need to figure out how we're going to rein that in. Because last year, like we had it's like 19 something % increase because we had such a tight House. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
There was some good things that were in there, obviously. Like that's how we managed to increase the cap for, like, we put those things in there to get something out of the bad situation. One of which was getting rid of the interest and dividends tax, which was our income tax. That was part of the last year's budget. And the same thing with increase the income tax, the income cap on the education freedom accounts, like things like that, and state of emergency reform, which was something that I ran on. It was basically making it so the governor could not declare indefinite states of emergency, which is like a holdover from like the COVID era. But
yeah,
it was very important to me. That's like why I ran. Like, that's why I moved to New Hampshire was COVID. So like I got in there and I helped get that in the budget so that the governor could not ignore it. It had to get signed into law.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, so 19% budget increase last year. I mean, that's significant. But I also know that in previous years, like there were significant budget cuts. I know because when I was in the Maine Senate, and I would come over to Pork Fest all depressed about like how terrible the budget was in Maine, and people would say, "Yeah, in Maine it was always like, hey, we managed to only increase the budget by like at the rate of inflation." And like that was like the conservative goal. And I would come over to New Hampshire, it's like, yeah, we actually we really cut spending year after year. So when you guys say you're looking to actually cut the budget, I believe you.
Yes.
Whereas
we should be able to, because we don't have a tied House this time, or we got to negotiate with the Democrats to get anything done. So
yeah. Awesome. And what else is going on?
So I don't know how much we want to spend on this, because I would love to close out on Defend the Guard. If that's cool.
Let's talk about Defend the Guard. I love Defend the Guard.
All right. Fantastic. So that's coming. That is, as we've talked about here, and I know you've talked on like many episodes, it basically says we're not going to send the New Hampshire National Guard to a combat zone without a formal declaration of war from Congress. We got this out of the New Hampshire House last year. We got it out of the New Hampshire House. Very close. It was bipartisan. It was the first House in the country to pass it. It's passed 2 Senates before in other states. It's passed our House. We're the first lower chamber to pass. We're the first chamber to pass in a bipartisan fashion. And then it died in the Senate. This is going to
without even the dignity of a roll call vote, which will not happen this time, right?
I really hope not. With like all those Liberty senators over there, I really hope that we get a lot more transparency coming out of there.
So we went from in the Senate 1 Liberty senator to, according to NHLA, 5. Now I don't know these 5 all that well. I don't know how awesome on you probably know them far better than I do.
I know a couple. It's really good. I got Victoria Sullivan, is a new senator from Manchester. She is a co-sponsor on Defend the Guard this time around. I also have a full slate of 10 co-sponsors, 7 Republicans, 3 Democrats. It remains a bipartisan bill in this state. I am going to be meeting with the Progressive Caucus to like convince, because there's some of their members aren't sold, but I will buy them. Like I will help. Like I will sell this to them, because this is something that during the George Bush era, this was a campaign talking point.
Bring the ACLU with you. Maybe
they need to be brought. Yes, they should be. This is exactly up their alley. They should be supporting this.
Well, the ACLU was helpful as I was fighting for Defend the Guard in Maine. I will say that. So and was helpful trying to sway over some of the progressive members of the legislature. So. Yeah, bring the ACLU with you. They maybe have some credibility with the progressives.
I hope so. I do have. So on this bill specifically, we just today we voted on House rules, and we got some of the very first bill hearings have been scheduled. Defend the Guard is scheduled for. Let me make sure I don't get this date wrong. The 17th, January 17th at 1:30 p.m. in Concord at the Legislative Office Building.
All right. I'm writing this down right now for myself, and maybe
Yep.
folks back home are going to want to do that for themselves. So you said January 17th.
Yep. It's a Friday. Yep.
Friday. So that's next week.
Yep. Yes,
All
it
right.
is. And it's it's at 1:30 p.m.
1:30 p.m.
Yep. At the Legislative Office Building in Concord.
A Legislative Office Building. All right.
Room 206. There's a whole boatload of rooms. It's the second floor, and you're going to go down the long hallway all the way at the end.
All right. Well, I have not checked my calendar yet, but it is my full intention to be there. This is a very important piece of legislation in my heart, and I hope that for those who are watching, they might consider it as well. Though I'll of course note that the Free State Project is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we do not do direct advocacy for legislation. And I am only speaking in my own capacity as myself, a guy who loves liberty. And I think this is a very important bill. And it is a direct way. We've always, for the longest time, people would go to Washington, D.C. and say, will you stop these wars? Will Congress exercise its responsibility to declare war? And they don't want that responsibility. This is the only way we have to force their hand. We can do it from the states. And this is very important. So, and if for folks who want to learn more about Defend the Guard, we can go back and watch the last episode we had with Tom Mannion. Yep. Episode 1, we talked about it in depth. But what would you say, Tom? Because I know you know the answer to this. Someone who says, a state can't challenge the federal government when it comes to foreign policy decisions like sending the National Guard into war. The State National Guard, they have a dual mandate. They're both state and federal. And if the commander in chief says you're going to war, you're going to war. And who are you as a little New Hampshire state legislator to say otherwise? So
as always, like the best, so it all dials back to the Constitution. The National Guard is meant to execute the laws of the Union. It has 3 missions: repel invasion, execute the laws of the Union, and repel invasion, quell uprisings, and execute the laws of the nation. There's nothing in there that says that they're even designed to be sent overseas whatsoever. What happened is they've been, the federal government has just been expanding and encroaching, and the states haven't pushed back enough. So in the 90s, there was a Governor Perpich, I think it was in Minnesota, challenged the federal government. And there was actually a ruling from the Supreme Court that says that, okay, well, the states can't challenge specifically for training missions during peacetime. There has never been a ruling from the Supreme Court that says that the states can't assert their rights over their National Guard units when it comes to deploying them overseas for combat. Another component of this is there is part of that was a challenge to it was called the Montgomery Amendment to section. It's like Title 10 is like the how the National Guard units are activated, and inside of it, as a section 12301, there's subsections B and D mention that the governor can withhold consent. Then they added this Montgomery Amendment that says that, except they can't withhold consent on the case of is a duration, time, location. And none of this is what we're challenging. We are challenging the constitutionality of the war itself. Like the AUMF process, the authorization for use of military force, is not a valid war declaration. It is an abdication of responsibility to the executive branch, where they have handed the power and the authority over to the executive to decide when the wars start, when they end, what the objective is, who the targets are. And Congress, all they're required to get is a report once in a while from the executive that they don't even necessarily file on time. And in the fiscal note for the Defend the Guard for New Hampshire, there's an entire block where they even say that the 2001 AUMF is a war declaration. And it's like, well, it doesn't even apply to what happened in Syria, because in the 2001 AUMF, it says that we're fighting the enemies of the United States, which would be Al-Qaeda, or the terrorists responsible for 9/11 on Al-Qaeda. But in Syria, we're on the same side as Al-Qaeda. So
yeah, we're literally celebrating now that we put Al-Qaeda in charge of the whole country.
Yeah. So right? I don't even know how that AUMF doesn't even apply.
Yeah. You would think that an AUMF that was passed in the response to the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks to go after the people who committed the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks would not authorize our federal government to give aid and comfort to the people who committed the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks. Yeah. And yet that is exactly what's happened over the last 20 years.
Yeah. That's exactly and that's what we're dealing with. That's what we're trying to push back against. And, the people that are opposed to this bill are largely just like the Pentagon and like their puppets in all the states, all the various adjutant generals are just opposed to this because the DOD told them so. If they want like another star and they want to get promoted or another medal, they can't push back against, or they can't be in support vocally of things like this. And every time like, they find some way of branding this, of defund the guard or whatever it may be. It's universal. It ends up being, it hits all the states at the exact same time. So that's coming from a central command somewhere in the Pentagon. That's just being broadcast out.
They're scared. And I think the fact that they have to mobilize the adjutant generals and they have to mobilize these 4-star Pentagon folks to go around and lobby against these every time they show up in a state legislature reveals a lot. And I think it also goes to show that the progress that has been made, the fact that we're winning on this battle, is the fact that they don't even bother defending the constitutionality of the wars. They don't bother defending the purpose and the mission of the wars anymore. They don't show up and say, it's so important that we be there over in Syria to defend freedom, to fight them over there so we don't fight them over here. It doesn't make a lot of sense when we're actively actually giving weapons to Al-Qaeda. Right? It doesn't make sense. Their argument just comes back to, well, they might cut our federal funding for our guard, and we would hate to lose federal funding. So we're going to send more New Hampshire young men off to fight and die in wars that Congress doesn't even care enough to declare.
And like, to me, I've been doing a pretty good, I've been doing a deep dive on like this whole federal funding thing. And like every committee chair at my state house says that is the go-to excuse whenever we try to push back against anything that the federal government does whatsoever. Like whether it's like health, vaccine mandates or certain curriculum in the schools, like you'll get somebody that comes in that's a head of a department in the state and be like, well, it puts federal funding at risk. We can't pass this. It's not just defend the guard. It's everything.
New Hampshire is the one state that wouldn't even implement a seatbelt law because of the, under threat of losing federal funding. It's
or helmets.
It's something as minimal. I mean, I like to harp on the seatbelt law because it's the principle of the thing. But it's like, in the grand scheme of things, it's a small tyranny, right? It's a small tyranny. But even that, New Hampshire has had the backbone to say, we're not mandating this small tyranny on our people. You can take your federal funds and you can shove it. But for sending our young men off to fight and die in wars, we're not willing to stand up on that. I mean, obviously the New Hampshire House is. The New Hampshire Senate, we'll see what they do this year. And thankfully, it takes two senators to demand a roll call vote. We only had one last time. Now we have got 5 theoretically. So there will be a roll call vote in the Senate unless something untoward.
I have to check. We just voted on our House rules today. I'm not sure if the Senate voted on their stupid rules. Like my fear was that they would change their own rules.
They suddenly increased the threshold to 6.
Yeah, or half the chamber or something insane. Like who the hell knows? Like I'll look it up. I'll ask my senator. I hope they didn't change that rule. That would suck.
It would be kind of like that time, we got pluralities in 5 states to submit Ron Paul's name into nomination at the convention, and they're like, we're changing the rules. It's 6 states now. Anyway, all right, we're running low on time. Tom, any final things you want people to know about the upcoming legislature? Say upcoming, it's already begun.
It's begun. That's the thing. So watch, if you have favorite legislators or something like that, or bills that that you want to watch, watch like a hawk, because these hearings can come up quick. We have 10 days, not even 9 days till my hearing. And I just found out about it today, right? We just got the email today. So you have to be on social media. I'll tweet out everything, all my bills, everything that I'm a co-sponsor on. I'm going to tweet about the hearings. I'm going to try to appear to every single thing that I'm co-sponsored on. I got put on 30 something bills, which is a record for me. I have a real 9 to 5 as well. So I got to balance all these things together. I want to be able to show up to testify to everything I agreed to co-sponsor. But you got to stay glued to social media, follow the people that are filing bills that you like, and be there for them. If you can be in person, that is the most ideal thing you can do, because I've seen public testimony shift a bill in person. I've seen what happened. We were going to pass something, a bunch of people showed up, either it was super contentious or whatever it may be, and it's just we can't pass this because obviously this upsets 50% of the people in this room right here. And it's not just sometimes it's some stupid edge case thing, or they rallied a lobbying group rallied some people. But in the case of some of these things, it's just like, oh well, this group and this group are the two people affected by this bill, and they're diametrically opposed on it, and we can't just like pass stuff willy-nilly if it's gonna upset these, really destabilize things, and especially if it doesn't have any like bearing on liberty or something like that, like whatever. The case that I'm talking about is actually, there was a bill about it was like recognizing one of the Abenaki tribes that are in New Hampshire, and we thought it was going to be like a feel-good, yeah, we'll do this, but it really upset like some other Native American tribes, and like they came in as like, it's like, okay, I get it. Like, we can't just willy-nilly pass something, even if it feels good, because it's obviously going to upset someone else. Like, there's nothing to gain from passing this. So showing up and testifying will sway a committee. Be sure, if you can show up and testify, that's fantastic. If you can't, emails work. And then, phone calls, phone banking, call your representatives, call the committee members. They will listen.
Well, I'll move heaven and earth to be there January 17th, 1:30 p.m. Friday. This will be the first bill I will have ever testified on in the New Hampshire legislature.
Awesome.
So I've never even been to the New Hampshire State House. So I guess this will be in the side bill, the legislative office building, but maybe I'll have to go check out the State House.
I'll take you on a tour.
See what it's like. All right. Yeah. Well, I will look forward to it. And I guess to all of our audience, if you care about Defend the Guard and you're in New Hampshire, maybe show up for that. Maybe I'll see you there. And Tom and I will both say, thanks for being here. What's the time limit on testimony?
It depends it's up to the committee chair. Usually the prime speaker gets as much time as they want, and then they can limit it. And it really depends on how packed the room is and how late the committee chair is willing to go. My committee chair is Mike Moffat. He's been very generous in the past with the testimony, and the fact that we only have 2 bills that day, they're both mine. And one, the latter one is Defend the Guard. We have basically from 1:30 until they're going to kick us out, I guess. I'm not sure. They eventually do close down the office building. Okay. So they'll kick us out at some point with security. Awesome.
All right. Well, I'll be getting prepared for that. Tom, thank you so much. I really appreciate the work you're doing. And we'll probably have you back on at some point, give us more updates throughout the course of the state legislature.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Representative. That's the show. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. To reiterate, again, Porcupine Day. It's going to be held on Groundhog Day, but you know what? Move over, groundhogs. We're celebrating Porcupine Day, February 2nd, 2025, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Learn more and get your tickets at fsp.org/Porcupine Day. And use the discount code PORCREPORT with a C for 5% off as a thank you from me for being a viewer of this show. And if you are a Porcupine patron, you get an even bigger discount code that has been emailed out to you just tonight. This will be a great event, celebrating 9 years since triggering the move. So come out, throw some axes, wear some flannel. And if you wear your Porcupine patron lapel pin, just like myself and Representative Mannion had on for this episode, you will get a complimentary drink ticket. So bring your Porcupine patron pin. That is fsp.org/Porcupine Day. All right, everyone. I hope to see you there. And I want to thank you for tuning in. I suppose I got nothing else to say other than, furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.